In 1775, which side did the Iroquois join in the American Revolution, and what was their impact on the war? The Iroquois tribe formed the Iroquois Confederacy between the late 1400s and the early 1600s. One of the largest Indian tribes in America, the Iroquois was composed of 5 sub-nations: Mohawk, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, and Seneca. At the beginning of the 18th century, the Tuscarora joined the Confederacy as a non-voting member after they were forced to leave North Carolina when defeated by the British in a war. All of these sub-nations combined to form one of the most powerful Indian tribes in America, who were conveniently all located in the New York area. The French and Indian War made the British and Native Americans enemies in competing for territories in America. Just a dozen years later, however, 3 of the Iroquois sub-nations wanted to join the British and the other 3 wanted to join the Americans in the American Revolution. Eventually, the Onondaga broke the tie as they chose to join the British, thus breaking up the Iroquois Confederacy. Although this decision appeared to be detrimental to the sub-nations of the Iroquois, each side knew what they were doing. Those who chose to join the British chose to do so as the colonists threatened their land. Those who joined the colonists chose to do so based off the sayings of Reverend Kirkland, a Presbyterian leader who acted as a missionary for the Iroquois tribe.
One of the key areas where the Iroquois contributed to the Revolutionary War was in the Battle of Fort Stanwix, a colonial fort in Rome, New York. In 1768, a treaty was made between the colonies and the Iroquois that declared territory north of the line declared at Fort Stanwix Iroquois land, and land south to be colonists' land. But as tensions between British and colonists grew higher, the British started attempting to take some of that land from the Iroquois to gain a point of attack on Fort Stanwix. To counteract this, the colonists attempted to make a treaty of neutrality with the Iroquois, who were currently allied with the British. This neutrality would take away a large force of Indians that could attack Fort Stanwix with the British. The Iroquois considered the treaty, because the British had many unfulfilled promises to them, and as a result weren't that eager to cooperate with England. On the other hand, the Iroquois needed trade goods only England could supply. This was settled by 4 of the tribes, the Senecas, Cayugas, Onondagas, and Mohawks allying with the British, while the Oneidas and Tuscaroras allied with the colonies.
Another major contribution that the Iroquois made was at Cherry Valley. In 1778, 600 Seneca warriors invaded the village of Cherry Valley in New York. They burned down the entire village and killed or captured over 100 settlers. This event would later be called the Cherry Valley Massacre. This particular event infuriated the Americans, and so they sent 4,000 men, led by Oneida scouts, to combat the Indian forces. The Seneca were defeated by the American campaign and eventually had to flee to Canada for safety. There was definitely fighting between the nations of the Iroquois. The groups that were loyal to the British would attack Oneida villages and then burn them down because they saw siding with the Americans as a betrayal. Over the course of the war, the total Iroquois population dropped from 8,000 to less than 5,000, meaning that over 3,000 Iroquois warriors died in the course of the entire war. Even when the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, there were still raids being conducted against the Americans. It wasn't until a separate treaty, called the Second Treaty of Fort Stanwix, was signed in 1784 that the fighting between the Americans and the Iroquois finally came to an end.
Being one of the most powerful groups in America, the Iroquois had a large impact on the Revolutionary War. Individual nations collaborated with either the British or the Americans for their own incentives. Each nation had a large impact in battles throughout the war due to their strong knowledge of their environments on which battles were fought.